The Giving membership is the complete spiritual growth package. For less than $30 per year, you'll get incredible perks from Giving Company's family of brands, including 5 free movie rentals every month from Christian Cinema and discounts on Christian books. Plus, Giving members have the privilege of partnering with World Vision to help end the global water crisis. Become a Giving member today at givingcompany.com/giving membership and start experiencing more fruitful living. The other side of the road is safe, where we sidestep being bothered and avoid getting involved. But rolling up your sleeves and boldly going where few dare to tread, that's walking through Samaria. Each week on our podcast, we introduce you to the special few who walk in the spirit of the Good Samaritan. On behalf of the Giving Company and your hosts, David Hendrickson and Dan Riveros, welcome to the Walking Through Samaria podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Walking Through Samaria. I'm your host, Dan Riveros, with my co-host,
David Hendrickson.
How's it going, man? We're in the office.
Hey, we are in the office.
In the studio,
that's right.
Yeah.
Not just in the office.
Welcome back.
It is nice to be face-to-face, Dan, I have to say.
I like it, man.
You're a recovering COVID guy.
COVID survivor.
You're beyond it by a couple months now, right?
Yep. Good. Taste is back. Smell is back. Everything good, man. Back to normal.
That is awesome.
What do we got today, David?
We have a very special guest in the office today, Dan, and we're gonna talk about the overlap in our journeys a little bit. You'll probably roll your eyes because, this is going to go back to when I started at Giving Company 6 years ago. But from World Vision, Terry Johnson is in the house. Terry.
Hey.
Welcome, man.
Welcome.
Thanks, fellas. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I thought we weeded out Auburn fans, Dan, from the lineup.
I think you attracted him,
He's
man.
at least number 3. Philip Langford, the president of IJM US, is an Auburn grad.
Okay.
Went to law school at Alabama, so that's weird.
It's okay.
And you probably know this, Dr. Ray Norman is an Auburn grad.
Yes.
We had him on.
All the greats.
Yeah.
So now, obviously,
He went to like Cornell or something after that, right? But Auburn, you got to start at Auburn.
Start somewhere.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, though, obviously, I'm not a grad.
You're a fan. I did say you were a fan.
Spouse of a grad.
Yeah.
And I'm the father of a grad.
Yeah.
Then a whole bunch of my cash went there.
That's how you get sucked in.
Yeah. I visited once. Like when I was in college, I visited Auburn.
Auburn? Did you really?
For like a night.
Yeah.
I went down there for their rodeo weekend.
Yeah.
And I got the walk around tour of that, and I was like, all right.
It's a great place. Loveliest village on the plain.
I've never been.
It was intense.
Terry is invited to Georgia for a football game.
It'd be a cold day.
Yeah, that's how I feel about Auburn. But we're glad you're here, Terry. It's
Thanks,
good
brother.
to see you. All right, I'm going to rattle off your bio here for our listeners. I think they're going to be encouraged by that. And then we are going to we're going to hit it all, Dan, in the next hour.
Let's do it.
Terry Johnson is a major gifts fundraiser for World Vision, the largest Christian relief and development organization in the world. He has served as the area director for philanthropy in the Southeast for the last 6 years. He has traveled with donor partners and colleagues to Ethiopia, Tanzania, Zambia, Malawi, and Honduras, where he has had the opportunity to see firsthand the success of World Vision's holistic approach to combating extreme poverty. Prior to coming to World Vision, Terry had a long career in business, primarily within the agriculture and technology industries, working and helping to lead well-established organizations as well as early-stage and startup companies. Terry and his wife of nearly 30 years, Suzanne, now live in the greater Atlanta area. They have one daughter, Meredith, and a soon-to-be son-in-law, Jacob.
Nice.
Terry, great to have you here.
Thanks,
Welcome.
brother. So good to be here.
So,
Thank you.
Your career's obviously lasted over 30 years, as you talk about. But when somebody hears about the agriculture industry, they're like, this dude's a marijuana farmer. Like, what? That wasn't
California, no less.
From California. That wasn't your experience in the agriculture industry.
No, mine was a little bit more legal at the time.
Yeah.
A little bit more legal at the time.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, you seem pretty calm, but you are getting close to giving your daughter away, Meredith, who we adore. I've met Meredith multiple times at World Vision events and other things, to this dude named Jacob, man. So how does it feel?
You ready?
To be,
Tell us about this character.
How's it go? I know, right? Jacob, if you're out there, we're going to talk about you, man. So get ready.
Yeah. I just saw him this morning.
Oh, okay.
Which was great. He happened to be in town.
All right.
Cool.
And so a couple of things. One is we're excited, and we're still far enough away because it's not till later this summer.
Gotcha.
When they actually get married.
Okay.
So right now it's all fun and games. And I'm just kind of hanging back.
When do you start working on your speech? Like, when does that happen?
I think when she was born, I started working on her speech. So.
It's a lifetime of contributions.
Thing. It's a lifetime thing. So we've been working on that for a while. But no, we're excited. And she and her mom are doing a great job of pulling it together. We're getting married. She's getting married out of town over in Nashville. But,
that's good.
Yeah, but
don't get sucked into the, hey, Dad, what do you think about the flowers, or what do you think about the place settings?
Exactly right.
Yeah,
exactly right.
I have no opinion.
And so we've seen all that. I'm good with everything, but she's done a great job of checking all the boxes and just being ready to have the big day.
Cool.
And I'm sure as we get closer, from what I've heard, my buddies who've had their daughters get married, the closer you get, obviously, and then definitely on the day of, it's a totally different experience.
Yeah.
So excited about it.
Well, I'm just hoping everything will be cleared up by the time it's for the wedding.
That's our plan.
Yeah.
Because there is like no room for social distancing at this venue.
Yeah, there you
It's
go.
going to be pretty tight.
Yeah.
So hopefully
That's how weddings
everybody's
should be.
vaxxed up
Yeah.
by then. But we're looking forward to it. So,
Cool.
and he's a great guy. He's one of these guys that I always say, I wish I would have been that guy when I was 27. So we really like him a lot.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
He's a good
Fully
man.
endorsed, Jacob,
For the
by
most
Terry
part.
and
Yeah.
Suzanne.
Yeah.
All right.
For the most
Nice.
That's good.
And an Auburn grad, by the way.
Oh, gosh. All right.
Keep adding to the list.
So, Dan, I don't know if you remember, but I am, what's today? 16th, 17th?
Today is the
16th
16th.
of March. I am 1 week away from my 6-year anniversary at Giving Company.
Nice.
And as I started, I left corporate America to do philanthropic work and faith-based work. And it just so happened my contact at World Vision in the Southeast became this guy named Terry Johnson.
Right.
And you had a very similar sort of experience. You were transitioning from the corporate world to doing philanthropic work.
Right.
And so we've kind of been at our new gigs for 6 years. It's
Literally the exact.
crazy.
My anniversary was a week ago today.
Okay.
So last Tuesday, so March
you're
the 9th.
2 weeks ahead of me.
Cool.
Yeah.
2 weeks, like to the
2
day.
weeks
That's
to the
crazy.
day.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's pretty amazing.
Well, I met Terry, and one of the first things that I did was ask him if he would come give a devotional to the team, because that's what happened. Now Dan and I say, "Will you come be on the podcast?" Back then it was like, "Hey, can you come in on
and
Wednesdays
talk
and give the team devotional?" I remember your story, a little bit of your story.
Sure.
Tell our listeners. Start with the moving car incident, if you don't
my
mind,
gosh,
and
sure.
talk a little bit about kind of your
Sure.
faith journey. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Parental neglect is how this starts.
Most of the folks in my family don't appreciate this story, I don't think, as much as I do. But so really, really young, and I don't know if you've had this experience, Dan, but when I was growing up, our families used to go on these just long,
Monster road
trips,
Yep.
to say vacation is a super liberal use of the term, right?
Yeah.
Vacation.
Often a station wagon with
Yes.
wood on the side,
Yeah.
Dan. That was kind of how we
National
rolled back then.
Lampoons,
Yeah.
okay.
So we would do these just weeks long, maybe month long trips. My dad's from Kentucky. My mom's from Louisiana. We had family in Texas. So we would leave California and be gone for weeks. Anyway, my first trip, I was still very young. This is 1966. I'm 3 years old. And we're in my uncle's 4-door Lincoln Continental, relatively new, right? And it's got what's known as
safe car, right? Nice
relatively
car.
speaking, safe car.
Back in the day.
Back in the day. But it had, I don't know if you remember this, but it's called suicide doors. So the back doors actually open the opposite direction.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So the handles on each door are actually really close to one another. So the 5 of us, so it's my mom and dad, me, my older brother, my older sister. And we are just outside of El Paso, Texas, about 30 minutes outside of El Paso, on what I would guess would be I-10, right?
Yeah, there you go.
And we had just been at a Stuckey's. Have you guys been to Stuckey's
Absolutely,
before?
with the
like a road
with the
stop?
pecan log roll.
Yes, and
Yes.
you get all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we had just literally been to Stuckey's. And so I've got a full set of clothes on, jeans, shirt, tennis shoes, the whole thing. We're in the back seat long before car seats were a thing, right?
Yeah.
They may have existed, but they weren't law. So we definitely didn't have any car seats, let alone using,
I don't remember car seats
right?
as a
using
kid.
The,
No way.
Using
No
the
way. No seat belts, nothing.
Heck no. So so we're out there on the highway, and my dad had just passed maybe a half dozen cars or so. And I'm sitting next to the door on the driver's side, back door, driver's side of the car. And I'm messing with the handle and the door flies open. Right? And it's a suicide door. So this sucker's staying open like this. And I take a header out the side door at about 70, 72 miles an hour.
Whoa. How old are you?
I'm 3.
3 years old. You tumble out.
And
oh my gosh.
Yeah. And
Imagine your parents.
Right? So they stop as quickly as they can, pull over, bail out. And I remember a lot of this was told to me, after the fact. But my mom jumps out, super hot, Texas, New Mexico asphalt, no shoes on. She, burns her feet, full of glass, all those types of things. So they run back, scoop me up off the side of the road. And what the amazing thing is, when you talk about in the moment miracles, I mean, my dad literally had just passed several cars on the highway, and there wasn't a car in sight until they were able to get back and scoop me up. And then they throw me in the back seat, and we had to head into El Paso, right, and end up at this Catholic hospital.
Medical mecca.
Oh, yeah. Cutting edge healthcare. No doubt.
Of all the places, right? It couldn't have been Boston or San Francisco.
60s? This is in 60s.
Car seats became
Oh, you looking it up?
car seats became mandatory in 1985.
Mandatory.
Yeah.
I graduated from high school in 1985, so it was a little late for me.
We still weren't wearing seatbelts.
Nice research there, Dan. Good
Thanks,
job.
man.
Yeah.
Good comeback.
So, is there some point in your life where somebody tells you this story and you're like, hey, maybe I was meant for something special?
Yeah. Actually, there are parts, big chunks of it, certain moments over the course of that I do remember. And some of that's probably, I'm sure, being told about it, over the years. But there's big pieces of that I remember. So one thing to keep in mind, by the time they got me to the hospital, the doctors actually told my folks, hey, listen, there's a good chance he's probably not going to make it through the night. There's too much trauma, too much blood loss, all these things. But no broken bones, thankfully. Got a big, split my head open on the way out. But so fast forward.
Probably young enough for no broken bones? Like
so
that's
you're
the only
very
thing.
flexible, very pliable, right? So you're more or less bouncing more than anything, right? But it had totally shredded all the clothes I had on. So literally the only thing I had left was my underwear and my T-shirt, of which they had to basically cut off of me. But anyway, fast forward literally 4 days, and I'm on my way home. So I had gone from,
this is it.
This is it. To load me back up in the car and headed home back to California.
Did they put you in the middle, maybe, for the drive back
with
home?
In the trunk. They actually put me in the trunk.
That's right.
Yeah. But anyway, so to answer your question, very much so. So it's always kind of been this watershed event or this benchmark in my life that I was able to look back on, really even before, I came to an understanding of what it meant to have a relationship with God, who Christ was, all of those things in my life. So even before that, it was a kind of a place I could point to in my life and say, yeah, I think the Lord was involved here. I think he had longer term plans for my life.
That is awesome.
So, thanks for asking.
A little bit of a side question, but as you have approached trials and challenges in your life, have you been able to go, well, geez, I survived tumbling out of a Lincoln Continental at 70 miles an hour in El Paso.
Sure.
I can deal with this.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And more so. And then there's other things that come along in life as we're adults or as you have a family, right, that challenge us, right? Or maybe some even more difficult situations you go through as an adult. One, you're older and you understand things more.
Yeah.
As opposed to when you're a child and you're going to forget a lot of that. But yeah, I've always been able to go back to that and say, I've been through this. I know the Lord had bigger plans. I know that he's not done with me yet. So yeah, you bet.
You have any near-death experience
How
there?
about that? Nothing like that.
Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah.
Following at 30 miles.
You?
No. I mean, I've almost got beat up a couple times, but not like.
I got mugged in Ethiopia when you and I were there
I
together.
remember that.
Did you really?
That wasn't a near-death experience.
Yeah,
Really?
He got bugged over there.
Well, you're out past
They
sunset
saw
or
me
something?
walk off the van and they were like, that's
Target.
our guy. Two guys approached me on either side and
Wow.
my phone was gone in a matter of 10 seconds and Mesrach Ayele tracked him down. And
Really?
Yeah, got my phone back. Yeah.
So you just gave it up right away, I would assume.
They
right?
took it. I had no idea it was gone. I'm standing there. The guys take off, and I'm kind of...
Oh, they picked you.
Yeah. And I'm like, hey, something's missing. It took me a few seconds, and I'm like, oh, they have my phone. But at that point, like, the World Vision mob was after him. Like,
staff was on them.
That's right.
That's great.
That's right.
Field staff are incredible.
Yeah, I haven't had a near-death experience, thankfully.
Not like that, where like your life flashes before your eyes. You know what I mean? Nothing.
Yeah. Just one last thing, because this is actually funny. The whole thing's fairly funny this far out, and it happened to me, so I can think it's funny. So a couple of years ago, I get this text from my wife, and she's out running errands with a good friend of ours. And they pull up behind this like Suburban, and you can tell they've got lots of kids. But on the back window, it says honk if one of the kids falls out.
Oh, gosh.
That's funny.
And I think it's hilarious.
That's funny.
And she takes a picture of it and texts this picture to me, and I just think it's hilarious.
That's awesome.
And so...
in today's day and age, like, I'm pretty sure the police would have come to the hospital and be like, can you play for us again how your kid wound up on the asphalt on I-10?
Exactly. So...
Well, I'm glad you're here.
Thanks, brother. Good to be here.
Yeah. So... give us a little bit. You're a long way from California, man.
Sure.
You're Southern California, Central California is what you would tell me. I still say that's right on, righteous
right there
area to Peachtree City. Give us a little bit of the journey.
It has been a journey.
Yeah.
So I think the way this is all going to play out long term is my life is going to be divided up into thirds, right? So the first third of my life, first almost 28 years, I spent in California, primarily in the Central Valley, and then over on the coast and up near the capital.
Do you surf? Did you surf?
You know, was at the beach a decent amount, but I don't know what the
deal is. You already fell out of the car.
Right.
Like, I don't need.
Right. I mean, we spent a lot of time at the beach, in school. But yeah, it's one of those things you look back on and you say, I wish I would have done that.
Gotcha.
When I was there.
Yeah.
But anyway, a little bit about, when we talk about agriculture and then technology and now here in the nonprofit world. So I was an animal science major in college. So that's where that comes from. And then I actually worked in the livestock industry in California, in the Western U.S. for several years and before I left.
Wow.
So in early 91, so last month was 30 years. So February the 7th was of 91 is when I left California. So almost 28 at the time.
How about that?
Yeah. And then in a very, very quick order, within the year 91, changed organizations, got married, and moved from California to Kansas City to Dallas to northern Kentucky, just outside of Cincinnati.
That's in 1 year?
All within a year. Yeah, so moved 3 times, got married, changed companies, did all of that.
Okay.
And that was in 91. Actually, with the intention, we thought ultimately we were coming here within a fairly short order.
91 to 2015. 24
so
years.
24 years. But we got here. The interesting thing was we actually got married here because Suzanne has family here in the Atlanta area. She grew up here in the South.
Was that the draw? Was that the pull to Atlanta?
Ultimately to get down here and do that. And she's from Montgomery originally, down in Alabama. So she's a lot of family in this part of the world. Anyway, we get to greater Cincinnati, northern Kentucky, and literally put down roots for 23, 24 years. Daughter was able to grow up in the same house her entire life, which was amazing. I love that part of it. And just, really involved, really deep relationships within our church, within the community. And it's funny because we even still, when we talk about home, we're still referring to northern Kentucky. It's so interesting.
Gotcha.
So when I get off the plane at CVG, you've gone through CVG several times, I'm sure.
Yep.
Walk off the plane, it still feels like home. We've been gone 5.5, almost 6 years now.
Yeah. I felt that way about Chicago for many, many years. Rhonda and I were both born there. We put our roots down there after college and thought we were going to live there forever. We weren't being drawn anywhere until we moved a bunch of times in a year, just like you guys. We went from Chicago to Dallas to Seattle to Atlanta, all in a year.
So Chicago still feels like home?
And when I land at O'Hare and think about taking the Blue Line downtown, or I'm in the city or in Barrington, which was our last stop, I mean, it feels like I never left.
Yeah.
There's a smell in Columbia that I associate with home. Every time I land,
I agree with that.
Nice. Atlanta has a smell too.
It does.
And when you land at the airport, but
How long in Colombia?
I was there just 2 years, 2.5 years, but I don't know. I remember when I went back, I was 13 when I went back, and there was a smell that like immediately triggered, you know?
Yeah.
Wow.
So do you make it back at all anymore?
Yeah, I was probably
occasion?
going like every other year, probably.
Yeah.
I had plans to go right before COVID. I'd actually expedited my my passport to go for my aunt's wedding.
Okay.
And then COVID just
Squashed all that.
squashed all that.
Yeah. But you'll have plans to get back.
Oh yeah.
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 That's
For
awesome.
sure.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, then and again, I mean, it still feels like home to a certain extent, but over the years, even since Suzanne and I have been married, we'd spent so much time here in Atlanta.
Gotcha.
That it was always very comfortable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And amazingly enough, when we moved to Peachtree City, we actually ended up moving near our former neighbors that lived with us in the same neighborhood up in northern Kentucky. And so,
how about that?
Yeah. So that those types of things have made it,
Delta connection? Was that a Delta connection?
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
Northern Kentucky and Atlanta are Delta towns, right?
At one
Or
time was a
Cincinnati,
huge hub for them, right?
Yeah.
Not so much today, but
Right.
yeah. So
How about that?
Yeah.
So put Atlanta into perspective. What's it living in Atlanta meant to you and Suzanne and the family, kind of in the time that you've been here?
Yeah, it's funny when we first had made the decision, and part of coming to World Vision was to, they wanted somebody on the ground here. So, but when we made that decision, we'll do that. Because Meredith is moving on, we're selling the house. I'm wanting to downsize, do all those things.
Right.
Hey, maybe we'll live in the city.
Yeah.
Let's do something different.
Yeah.
Because we've done suburbs.
I feel that.
We've done all
Dan
that.
and I have talked about that a lot.
Working
like
in the yard,
being in the urban
right, doing all that
environment for
stuff.
sure.
And I was pretty much over that. And
Peachtree City.
Peachtree City.
There's a city there somewhere.
Yeah. So, but no, it's been great. It obviously, from the first times we started to come back here in the early 90s to what it is today, just the growth of the city. I love I really do love the city.
Yep.
Entertainment wise, food wise, all of those things. It's a great city.
Yeah.
It really is. The culture's here, right? I mean, it doesn't feel like you're in the South necessarily. It's got
exactly
it's got elements of that.
Yep.
But I think it's much more a big metropolitan. And
that was the big surprise for me moving to Atlanta. Yeah. Rhonda and I being Chicagoans for the most part, we were like, Atlanta, that's the South. Like, that's redneck country.
Yeah.
Forgive the term to our listeners. But getting here, like, Atlanta's way more than that. Yeah. I mean, like you mentioned, cultural, home of the civil rights movement. Yeah. It's very transient. So people live in Atlanta. They're from all over the world. Right. Corporate America's doing fairly well here. And so we were pleasantly surprised at moving to the South, in quotations for our listeners. My fingers are showing quotations. It's a big, awesome city.
It is.
Yeah.
There's Atlanta and then there's Georgia.
Yes. Two different places.
Things. Yeah.
Two different places.
For sure.
No. Really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have your choices of churches where you want to plug in from that perspective.
No shortage there.
No short of choices there. So all of those things.
That's good.
Right?
Well, I want to say thanks to World Vision, and you're going to have to tell us about that decision in your life.
Sure.
But I moved to Atlanta in 2006. You got here in 14 or 15. When did you guys
Summer of 15.
move here? Summer of 15. Man, the number of donor representatives in the Southeast, like, it kept turning over. And I remember talking to Tony Frank and some of the folks at World Vision, like, hey, when are we going to get the same person that we can interact with and collaborate with and strategize with and all that? And so it's just been a delight to have you for the last 6 years. It's just been amazing. You and I were getting throttled at the same time.
Right.
And I don't want to over dramatize my decision, but to leave corporate America, where I had spent 1989 to 2015, 26 years, to go do nonprofit mission-oriented work, any business decision, any work decision was always dramatic for me. Like, it was always stressful. And am I doing the right thing for God, for my family, for myself? And I was fairly stressed out over my decision. I took about 90 days. Talk about yours. Talk about this decision to go do philanthropic work with World Vision. They are the 800-pound gorilla, certainly, in Christian charity around the world, do phenomenal work. I think that's one of the things, Dan, you and I liked about our trip to Ethiopia was they're not just raising a bunch of money. They're actually getting their hands dirty, digging wells,
Right.
you know, dealing with extreme poverty and starvation and medical care and child protection, like all these intense things. Anyway, I'm lengthening the question as I always do, Dan, on this podcast, but just talk about your decision to transition, because I think this is something for our listeners to grasp and digest, which is, hey, at some point in your life, I believe this for all of us, we're going to get decisions like this.
Sure.
Where are we going to spend our time, talents, and resources, and where can we have the most impact?
Yeah. Well, it's a complicated answer at some level. At some level, it's a complicated answer.
Well, it was a fairly long journey for you,
right?
right?
I mean, really, the journey, if I'm to be completely transparent here, goes all the way back probably to the beginning of my career, even coming out of school.
Wow.
Because the first time I really felt like the Lord saying, hey, you know, I want you in ministry, was probably a couple of years into my career. And I can take you back to the moment, at least where I said it out loud, that I knew what was going on.
Wow.
I'm in the parking lot, sitting in a car with a young lady, my former girlfriend at the time, in a parking lot in an apartment complex. And she's like, what is up with you? You know, and I'm really not myself. And I said these words out loud. I said, I think the Lord wants me to go into ministry, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I literally said, I don't want to do that, which I don't recommend that as a strategy.
Yeah.
But so I pushed back against that.
Yeah.
I think part of that, and maybe you felt this way too, when we thought about ministry, right, especially at that age, back then, it was about, you know, being on a church staff. It's about being a pastor, all the things I really did not want to do.
Yeah.
That's kind of my
right.
view, right?
I was the same way.
Yeah.
Same way.
My
That's not, I
view.
do not want to do that work.
Right.
No,
That's not
thank
what
you.
I wanna do.
Yep. Yeah.
So get back to business, keep working, and get about, you know, my career. Probably early 2000, my first trip to the field, right? Just on a short-term church mission trip, Central Mexico. Super, you know, my first exposure really to extreme poverty.
Yeah.
Right? In that
And it'll
context.
rattle you, right?
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
does.
at the end of the day,
Yeah.
Dan, right? Like we saw that first community without water.
Yeah.
And I mean, it'll rattle you for sure.
Especially the first time, if you've never seen anything like that,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
never, you've
yeah,
never
yeah.
been exposed. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh.
Yeah. When you see the absolute, you know, what we call the fragile context, or the absolute edge,
Yeah.
right? It's it'll get your attention. So we continue to make trips, and we were in partnership at the time with some churches out of Texas. So we were doing these joint trips together. And really, then again, you know, I think the Lord really started to turn, you know, the switch on for me, at least from an interest perspective. And then some of the books that I was reading, some of David Platt's material,
Oh, yeah.
of course,
It's
Rick
good
Warren's
stuff.
material,
Yeah.
all of this coming at the same time. And then making my first trip into Haiti. The church that we were a part of for so long in northern Kentucky has an orphanage in a couple hours north of, up in Gonaives. So those first couple of trips to Haiti really wrecked me, right? And
That'll do it.
right? Dan, you
Yeah.
talked
It's supposed
about,
to. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
supposed to.
Yeah, yeah.
And you talk about the smell that brings back memories, right? When you get off the plane in Colombia. Well, there's definitely a smell in Haiti if you've ever been there. And I can recall that. Anyway, that's super, super extreme, you know, poverty, right? Probably at the time, the poorest country, at least in the Western Hemisphere. So this is post earthquake, post hurricane, all of the things that really had devastated Haiti at the time. Now it's like I'm full on, you know, aware that, you know, Lord's really doing something in my life. Fast forward. Do you want the whole story?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
This is good.
So fast forward. So this was probably 2010, 11, 12.
You're getting closer.
Right? So we're getting closer.
It's actually saying yes.
Yeah, so this
after.
is like 2012. And now I'm reading like David Platt's Radical book.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's wrecking you.
Yeah,
all
it
over
will.
again.
Yep.
It will. if you're paying attention,
Yes.
right? If you take it to heart, it'll wreck you if you let it. And okay, so now I'm going to fast forward a couple of years, doing some startup stuff. You know, once you kind of get into that mode, it's a little bit addictive, right? You're doing a startup company, all the kind of energy that comes with that. So I'm in the midst of that, but I'm a little burnt out on that, quite frankly. And now back in the technology space, but more in the training space, business development. And so you mentioned a good friend of ours, Tony Frank, just a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
So here's the story where the Lord really showed up. So this is October of 2014. And I get a text from Laura, who you know, here in Atlanta. And she is literally on her way on her first vision trip with World Vision to Zambia. She is in the airport here in Atlanta. Tony Frank happens to be walking through the airport, and they run into each other. And they know each other by this time. And Laura's like, what are you doing in Atlanta? And Tony's like, well, I'm here to, have a few interviews, looking to
find another
donor. All right. And she goes, well, tell me about that. Yeah. So he kind of lays out the job description and all of that. And Laura goes, I know just the guy.
Nice.
And literally, she texts me from the plane before they take off to Zambia. She goes, get in touch with this guy. Go look this up. It was like the job description or whatever, World Vision. And sure enough, so I fire off a couple of emails to Tony, and he finally gets around to getting back to me sometime in November.
Who's this guy?
Who's this guy? So he finally gets back to me in November. So first week of December of 14, he and I meet up again here in Atlanta for breakfast at the Flying Biscuit.
There you go.
That's Atlanta.
That's Atlanta.
That is
Atlanta.
right.
That's
I'm
right.
like,
Flying Biscuit.
I'm going to take this job. If I can come to the Flying Biscuit all the time,
That's
I'm
exactly
here.
Right. It's an incentive.
So we meet in Buckhead at the Flying Biscuit.
Yeah.
And we spend like an hour and a half together. And then I get on the plane and go home. But I'm literally in that moment, I'm like, I'm either getting this gig or I'm going to fly. I'm going to fly it into the ground, try and get it. So later that evening, even.
So you didn't need convincing that was what you wanted to do.
Not at all.
Gotcha.
So here's
I was a little different. I have to.
Well, the crazy thing is we had been, like yourself, child sponsors for, by then, like 15 years.
Yeah.
So we knew of World Vision from a child sponsorship, a gift catalog perspective, but didn't really understand the depth, right, or the scope of the work that they did.
Yeah.
So once the ball was rolling, I was jacked up. So we meet for about an hour and a half. I fly home. That evening, I talked to, at the time, Sheila Rudd, who was heading up our HR talent acquisition efforts at World Vision. She and I spent an hour on the phone that night. She spends an hour trying to talk me out of the gig, out of the job.
Wow.
Because she knows I've got this kind of startup background, early stage company, other things. And she goes, we're this big, to your point earlier, we're this big,
Gotcha.
ocean liner.
Yeah.
And it's a little hard to turn the corner sometimes, right? To turn things around. Maybe not as quick.
Yeah, if you like quick decisions.
Yeah, quick decisions, put things in action.
Yeah.
She goes, this may not be. And and I always appreciated that about Sheila, because she literally tried to talk me out of it, which
you would not be deterred.
Yeah. And I was just, and I really appreciated the fact that she did that.
Yeah.
So this was December. Fast forward. They finally get around to extending an offer in February. And then March 9th of 2015 is what I referred to. Maybe you do too.
Madness.
A year later. It was a year later.
That was not that.
But I call it my last first day.
Oh.
Yeah. That's my last first day, was March 9th.
Wow.
So.
That was it. 2015. That's right. I was thinking a year later. Yeah. 2015.
2015, March the 9th. Last first day.
Wow.
So,
That's good. So that's going to be your last third.
Yeah.
That's what
I think it is. Just from a work perspective, from a career standpoint. I think I've found where I'm going to land and spend the rest of it.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks.
Well, it is a great story. And I think, just to recap it for our listeners, I do believe that all of us as believers, from time to time, you're going to get the ask.
Yeah.
And I don't think bad things happen if you say no.
Right.
But my journey, not that I want to talk about it, but I had to make sure that's what was going on.
Right.
I didn't want to say yes to something that wasn't God asking.
Right.
Because I loved my job, and anyway, so that was my, but if that's what I thought was going on, I had resigned to myself that yes would be the answer, because I had said no a dozen times, maybe not that many, but it felt like a dozen times from 1989 on, you know. Good
Thanks,
for you.
Thanks for his persistence, though, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So it's funny, something you just said there. You said I had resigned myself to that. So I would say 6 years later, you would not use that same
right
yeah phrase. You wouldn't say I resigned myself. You're like, thank the Lord that I made the decision.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Very well said.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about World Vision stuff. Now that you're there, you've been there for 6 years.
Yeah.
I think maybe the first thing, Dan, you're a COVID recoverer.
Yep.
I would say survivor, but you're a young,
feels
healthy,
weird to say survivor,
bouncy
right?
boy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about COVID.
Sure.
Give us the scope of COVID from World Vision's eyes, because I think I've mentioned this more than once on this podcast, and certainly to the team here at Giving Company. It looks a little bit different if you're in Ethiopia and only 14% of your medical clinics even have running water, when the medical directive is to wash your hands all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So with that as a little bit of an on-ramp, give us the scope of COVID from World Vision's eyes.
Sure. Yeah. And I think you said this already, but we do have a tendency, right? We view everything that goes on in the world with a Western lens laid over the top.
That's right.
Of it, right?
Yeah.
You know, what it means, how it impacts us personally. So it really is a much different experience. Unfortunately, not a lot of the experience is being necessarily broadcast, or not a lot of us are aware of it, right? At least here in the U.S. So first I'll say this, World Vision from a global response, from a single issue, single event, single issue, largest response ever.
Really?
Yeah, by World Vision, both in scope as well as, just numbers of people
Not
reached.
Tsunamis, earthquakes, civil wars.
Right.
COVID.
From the standpoint of, both financially speaking, and then the total reach in terms of the number of folks that, that were impacted through the work. So you're looking at 59 million people that have benefited probably from the World Vision approach to our place in the world, or at least, what we were going to do with regards to COVID. And then total from a resource or from a financial perspective, by far, the largest response that we've ever had globally. So that's through the entire sponsorship, not just World Vision US.
And let me interject a question.
Yeah.
World Vision probably had maybe a little bit of a heads up, maybe more than the average citizen in the United States, because you have a global footprint.
Right.
I mean,
so
maybe you saw what was going on in Asia or in Europe or what have you.
No, that's a great point.
It's the biggest response you've ever had to anything. Like, who takes that on? So was it the humanitarian assistance group?
Yeah.
Like, how does it mobilize?
Yeah, and great point. They were already actually involved in that part of the world early on. So we had this kind of running head start.
Gotcha.
And then time to develop an approach, how we're going to do this on a global scale, right? And what's the most important thing? Most important thing in a lot of the places where we work, in the lion's share of the areas where we work globally, was education, right? It's educating, right, the communities.
That makes sense. Yep.
It's educating through faith leaders, right? It's educating through the schools. It's educating, right, the communities, right? What's it mean to social distance? Those types of things. The importance of hand washing, all of those things.
Yeah.
But to your point, in a lot of the places where we work, obviously, access to clean water is not necessarily readily available, right? It's not on the school campus, those types of things. So there was measures. Obviously, it ramped up a lot of our work in what we call our wash work, or our water, sanitation, hygiene work. Really took off during that time. Here's the thing. I think it's important for our listeners to understand, as it relates to COVID and the impact it's had in the developing world, especially in the margins, in kind of fragile state context. Not really impacted per se from the health side of this thing initially, right? That was never really the threat early on.
Got it.
Hadn't gotten there yet, quite frankly, right? We weren't seeing the number of cases that we would see in the West, right?
Yeah.
In Europe, in the U.S., places like that. So we're not seeing those types of numbers. But what we were starting to see early on, and you can go back and look at articles in the Wall Street Journal and in New York Times, even early on, this is just a few months in, where we were already starting to see what we would call aftershocks to COVID-19, aftershocks to the pandemic. What are aftershocks, right? Aftershocks are food insecurity, the inability to go to work and raise money for that day so you can survive, so you can buy food for that day. Because in a lot of parts of the world, the lockdown measures were extreme.
Yeah.
Right? We can look at Central Latin America, places like Honduras, where you couldn't leave a week at a time, 2 weeks at a time. Right?
Yep.
And we're not talking about folks with, a pantry full of excess food. I can't go out and I can't make my daily living to provide for my family. So our response, like in a place like Honduras early on, very quickly became distribution of food, right? And things like that. It was about access to capital or loans and those types of things for the business owner, right? For the business owner who can't get back to work. So those are all kind of what we today call aftershocks, right, to the pandemic. So that a lot of our focus was there. And then traditional education, everything that we see here, providing, masks and, all of the things that, we're all familiar with in a more traditional approach to fighting the pandemic. But, our biggest approach. And so today, I think we've reached over 59 million, about 26 million of those were children in the overall effort. So
the word that's coming out, or maybe the talking point, the dialogue, that's a better way of saying it, that's coming out is COVID has set back the world in terms of extreme poverty. Extreme poverty still less than $1 a day. Is that how we?
It's about $1.90. So it's
$1.90.
It's south of $2.
South of $2. Yeah. And to your point, what we've experienced in the U.S. has been the ability for people to stay quarantined for weeks to months on end. Most of the world doesn't. That thought couldn't even cross their mind for a day or a week.
Yeah.
Right. Like you mentioned, you go out that day.
Yeah. And earn that day
what you need for that day.
Right.
Help us mobilize our listeners to maybe leaning into what's in front of us, because we may not experience that in the U.S. And like you said, our worldview sometimes gets shaded by the Western view or the Western experience. Maybe encourage our listeners, if you don't mind, like, hey, we're going to have to step up, because there are many parts of the world where the aftershocks are going to
linger. Yeah, they are. I would say there's no stimulus check coming in the lion's share of the world. There's just not, right? There's other countries, obviously, that have taken similar approach to the U.S. and doing stimulus checks and those types of things. So, but the lion's share of the world's not in that position. Let me say this: I'm very proud of the nonprofit humanitarian community as a whole, as it relates to our donor partners, because they really have stepped up and have responded. Those folks who were already in the boat with us stepped up even more, because they felt like in this moment we need to do more, not back up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, maybe doing more sometimes meant I'm gonna give to some more locally based or domestic based type nonprofits or ministries. But even this is the best way I can tell you, just from a response perspective, from the folks that within our community, and I think really within the Christian humanitarian world, we were projecting to be off from a revenue perspective last year, let's say double digits. That was our projection.
Reasonable projection.
Yeah.
Given the circumstances.
And trying to read the tea leaves.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's what we were looking at. So it ends up, 2020 ends up being our best year since 2009. We have our best year in, over 10 years. We send the most dollars to the field that we've ever sent as an organization, right?
Yeah.
So year over year, we actually have a better year than we were projecting even pre-pandemic, which is amazing, right? It's a miracle.
Yeah.
And so I think the Lord really, put that on people's hearts to respond. Now, that being said, we run the risk of backing up a couple of decades on the progress that's been made in the developing world, in the fragile state context. And there's been tremendous progress made. We've cut things in half, literally, in the last 15 years.
Right.
It's been amazing. Access to clean water, elimination of extreme poverty, all of those things. Cutting the number of children that die on a daily basis in half, literally.
Yeah.
Right. So all of those things need to be celebrated. But because of this pandemic, because of the extreme measures and not being able to get out and raise funds for that day, or I can't go out and work in the field, or I cannot run my small micro enterprise for an extended period of time, you're looking at losing, decades of progress.
Yeah.
No access to capital. So one of the things that we've done, as you're familiar with the Vision Fund, right?
Yeah.
Which is our microfinance arm at World Vision. We're in recovery mode. I mean, we're literally going to be people's stimulus package.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
So folks that have historically been clients of ours in the microfinance space, they don't have the ability to repay those loans. So we're going to have to forgive those for a period of time.
Yeah.
And on top of that, we're going to have to go in, double down, and loan funds to those folks so they can continue to move forward. So, yeah, it's a different place. I'm confident that the backing up of progress won't be as extreme as we thought early on.
Yeah.
But the aftershocks, not a lot. We don't talk a lot about that in the U.S. We don't talk about necessarily aftershocks, and not to downplay the struggle, because there are real struggles in the U.S.
Yeah.
There are, and especially frontline workers, right? Folks in the service industry, folks that have not been able to go back to work.
Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah.
That's a real thing, right?
Yeah.
So food insecurity,
Right.
right? All of those things, they're very real. And so don't want to downplay those at all. The difference between life and death is maybe not quite as significant or not quite as dire as it would be in other places of the world.
I remember you and I want to talk about life in the field, because Dan and I have been there and you've been there. But you and I did an event with Rich Stearns, the previous president of World Vision USA. It's now Edgar Sandoval. And we talked about the number of the most fragile countries that World Vision participates in.
Right.
And it's like 22 out of the top 30, something like that.
It's close. Yeah, there would be about 50 countries that would be considered fragile state context, and we're in about 33 of those, maybe.
So, I mean, you guys go to the spots where the help is needed.
Well, and really that's where it's all retreated to. Right? I mean, again, going back to this progress we've made globally, not just through World Vision, but all of the folks in this space, right, that are providing humanitarian development efforts. So that's where it's retreated to, right? It's in the margins. It's in the kind of fragile state. That's the last frontier, right, of extreme poverty. So that's really where we need to be headed, and that's really where the work is. Because we're excited, and I think you've seen work. You guys have been to Ethiopia. You can be excited about the progress that's been made in that part of the world, right? Not that it's not without its challenges, but we're far ahead of where we were 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. So you have been to Ethiopia, Tanzania, Zambia, Malawi, and Honduras. You and I went to Honduras together.
We did.
And
we were bunkmates, actually.
We were bunkmates. That's right. That's right.
You don't usually do that.
Yeah.
Just so our listeners understand, we don't typically do that. David and I were bunkmates on that trip.
Put the two out of control dudes together.
Yes.
So I remember, I want you to talk a little bit about some of the tough things that you've seen, and then maybe we'll talk about some of the redemptive things that you've seen. But here's my recollection from Honduras.
You bet.
we get there, and the first place that we go is a community without clean water.
Right.
And you bring the group, some Denver Mattress folks, myself from Giving Company, couple individual donors,
Right.
down to the river.
Yes.
And it's miserable, Dan. I would say it was worse than our experience in Ethiopia, just because
sure.
of the number of people that were trying to do life things in that dirty river. So you see the animals urinating and defecating in the river. You see moms washing clothes. You see kids gathering water. And you're like, I can't believe what I'm seeing. And Terry asked me, I feel like it was last minute, Dan, but he'd asked me to do the devotion one of the days that we were in.
This guy could drop it like this, right?
It's
like the highlight of the trip.
He actually gave me like 2 weeks notice. He gave me plenty of notice. Anyway, I see a picture of this little boy. The picture is seared on my brain to this day. And he wants to play in the river. He's maybe 3. And he just wants to play, right? He's a little boy, and he's like, this is what we do. And his mom has got a pan in his hands, and she's like, no, you've got to be retrieving water.
Yep.
And it's like a normal mother-child scenario. It is disintegrating relationally, right?
Quickly, yeah.
And he is mad and frustrated. And I go to take his picture, Dan, and he looks right at my iPhone. And what I envision going through his mind, and I'm convinced this is true, is why is that guy standing behind the electronic device taking my picture?
Right.
And why am I standing in this dirty river wanting to play, but I can't because my mom's actually wanting me to gather this dirty water, which is going to make my family sick? That was literally, I mean, his eyes were piercing, looking right at me.
Right.
And I will never forget that moment. Now, thankfully, because of World Vision and some donors, RTI, like I think that village has clean water today, if I understand correctly.
that's awesome.
And
They announced it that day that the project was
going to start. And you know,
there's a lot to celebrate.
The clinic nurse is telling us how miserable things are. I mean, it was
she showed up with the
awful.
data, right? The local nurse did.
So this was supposed to be a question for you, and I actually gave everybody my miserable experience.
I don't know if you can paint a better
I'm gonna
picture
ask
than
Dan one from
That was a pretty good picture,
Ethiopia.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
But give us maybe one or two of those tough experiences that you've had in the countries that you've visited.
So similar. So this always blows my mind, and you hope people can really appreciate and understand when we talk about safety nets or their lack thereof.
Yeah.
Because the places that we go back to this kind of fragile context is where we are. Their own governments don't even go. There's nobody showing up with a program, or with a safety net, or to bring you clean water on the behalf of. Right? So
It's hopeless.
So there is hopelessness.
Yes.
But the beautiful thing about your story, David, I think, as intense as that was, and whatever was going on in that young boy's mind, and the pain that you felt, man, that right there, that friction, God uses that, right?
Sure.
Which is the beautiful thing in all of this.
Yeah.
Right? So in the work that we're all a part of, the beautiful thing is we take those with much who might spiritually be struggling, and he brings them together with folks with nothing materially wise, but strong in faith.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
brother, that's all they got.
Yeah.
And brings those parties together to make just incredible testimony, right? And speaking to the power of God at work through you, God at work through Dan, right? And being in that moment and being committed to that work. So that's the beauty in all of it.
Yeah.
As ugly as it gets. So to your question, the tough things are always getting back in the car.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that.
Right?
I would agree with that.
Even when you know that help's on the way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we got to celebrate, right, along with Amy and some others.
Yep,
And Mike,
yep.
I think Mike was on that trip with us. We
Yeah,
got to
Mike Gillespie. Shout out to Mike Gillespie,
Yeah.
Amy Thompson.
Yeah,
Yep.
all on that trip with us,
Yep.
right? And for Amy to have the opportunity and to announce that, clean water was coming,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that was great, to celebrate that. But to get in the car and have to leave in that moment, knowing that, hey, we got snacks in the car, we got clean
There's
water in the
bottled water
car.
in the car.
All
Yeah.
of those things, right?
Yeah.
You've been there.
Yeah.
Right? So it's that, right? That's tough.
I agree.
So anytime you go into a situation of want or lack, right? And I think in Honduras, when you go into some of these homes that are on the hillside, right? Or they're not really in a community, they're just along a road up on the hillside.
Yeah.
And it's a mother and her 2 kids, and grandma's there.
Yeah.
And it's dire.
Yeah. And you need a donkey to help
Right.
carry the water.
And it's just like, right. All of it.
Yeah.
And it's a big hike to go get less than,
Yeah.
right? And I've seen that over and over and over. And that's the leaving that's the hardest part.
Yeah.
Right. But what's really glorious is to go back a year later or 2 years later, whatever that looks like, and go to a school maybe that you visited that didn't have.
Yeah.
They didn't have clean water. They didn't have clean latrines. They didn't have a wash club that the kids were excited about. To go back there and see that in all its glory, right?
Yeah.
So
That's cool.
You have one from Ethiopia, Danny?
I mean, just the lack of hygiene. That was probably the thing that stuck out to me.
Yeah.
It was different. Ethiopia, lack of it was very impoverished, but I didn't feel danger there.
That's
how
right.
I felt in other
Yeah,
places.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like sometimes when I've gone to Colombia, I'm like, oh, it's dangerous right here where I'm at.
doubt,
Like,
right?
yeah,
There's a
but
reason,
it's
right?
not even as poor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was kind of different, just the extremities of different, from Guatemala too, that the amount of trash that was just everywhere. It was just like, oh, this is awful. So just, different places have different extremes, different measures they have to deal with,
Right. Right.
I remember when we, and I don't know if World Vision always plans it this way, but on the 2 trips that I've been on, you see the toughest community first.
Sure.
And that was the case in Honduras. It was brutal. And that was the case in Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, we're kind of long drive to the remote village where there's no clean water and the family and the kids are in the river. It was just fewer people, I think, than our experience in Honduras. So maybe I thought that was better, but it was still dire, right? Animals in the river, the whole thing.
Right.
We turn around and leave. Like you said, getting in the car is awful. And you're asking, I'm sure the World Vision people are like, tell those giving company people to shut up. Because we're like, well, when are you coming? And like, when's the project going to happen? And like, tell us this is going to get better. And that was a community that I think had some logistical challenges, right? Of soil and piping and, digging and just some stuff. It didn't seem, Dan, like a long drive to where we get to village that had clean water.
Right.
Yeah.
And it did maybe
not at
45
all.
minutes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like it didn't seem far away, but the experience was so different. So this was a village where the water didn't get piped to the individual homes. There were water points with several faucets in the middle of the village, maybe 8. I think that water point that we saw had maybe 8 faucets to it. Terry, there was a party. I mean, they came out and met us before we showed up, and they're singing and dancing and giving of gifts and the bread ceremony. And I'm like, we're only, I don't know how far, 10 miles?
Yeah.
I don't know what it was, but I'm like, what a crazy contrast. Water makes so much.
All the difference in the world.
Yeah.
Really does.
Crazy.
It touches everything. It
Yeah.
really does. Whether it's economic or it's education or it's health.
Frees up women, right? And girls,
Does.
they often
Does.
get the
Girls
the
get
low
back
end
to
of this.
school.
Yep.
Moms can stay home, take
Yeah.
care of their family, start a small enterprise.
Yeah.
It touches so much, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love Ethiopia. So people there are beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great place.
I don't know if y'all on your trip there went to Boset. I had the incredible opportunity to actually meet at the time, one of our sponsor girls there. And we went to her home in her village and met her, and it was incredible.
That's awesome.
But we, on an up note, I guess, or a redemptive type story, maybe. On that trip in Ethiopia, we were just outside of Boset. I don't know if you guys were in that area, but we were in a community and met with a pastor, young pastor, and his kind of volunteer staff, in which was now their church. But just prior to that, there was no church in that community. There was no evangelism taking place, no Christian discipleship work being done there. Mm. And he was there with his family to kind of make that a reality. And there was a whole lot of folks in that community that were as determined not to make that a reality, to the point where they tried to kill him multiple times, tried to literally burn him alive, he and his family in their home, locked the doors, the windows, tried to light him on fire, right? So one of the perpetrators, or one of the folks that was involved in that, kind of switch over here. He's at home. He's got a family. He's got a sister. Has a sister who's paraplegic, or she can't walk, doesn't have use of her legs. And basically on a daily basis, he just puts her outside on a mat. Mm. Wow. And she wants, obviously she wants to move on. And she says to her brother, she goes, I want you to get that pastor to come and pray over me, or I'd just soon die. So this pastor, who her brother has tried to kill, comes, to their village, to their community, lays hands on her, right? We don't see, because of a lot of reasons, we don't see a lot of in-the-moment miracles sometimes in the West, right? In the developed world. In the moment, she stands and is mobile.
That's crazy.
And from that day forward, obviously changes her brother's life.
Right.
This guy
That'll do it.
It'll do it in the moment. And so now they have a church. They've got 200 people. They've got an after-school program, right? That we support as an organization through materials and training of faith leaders and those types of things, right?
Yeah.
To hear that that story, I mean, that's right.
That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So with that, as we wind down here, Terry, talk a little bit about. We're going to talk about Good Samaritans in a sec, Dan, and bring Terry back to our experience in Ethiopia. But talk a little bit, what's on the docket for World Vision these days? I'm sure there's still a lot of COVID, but when you guys are at your strategy meetings, you're a business development guy, you're a business guy. What do you guys see as critical for World Vision in the next 3, 5, 10 years?
Sure.
And what would you want aspiring donors or current donors to be thinking about?
Right. I appreciate that opportunity. Not to go down this path, it seems like we always end up here, but it is really a significant part of the work that we're doing right now. Just recently, in Rwanda, in the country of Rwanda, we crossed the finish line to raise the necessary funds to bring clean water to everyone, everywhere we work in the country of Rwanda. Mm-hmm. And we did it in about a year and a half, sooner than we thought we would, right? And the entire, the Rwandan government is committed to everybody in the entire country by 2024. Probably beat that as well from a timing perspective.
Awesome. Yep.
That's exciting. So a couple of things. We know it can be done. We know that people will respond and want to be a part of something like that, that kind of motivated approach to, alleviating access to clean water. So we got this momentum behind us. Let's go do the next one. So the next country, Zambia, where that same kind of efforts taking place. Yep. So as an organization, and we've actually made this commitment globally, is that everywhere World Vision works, everyone everywhere we work will have access to clean water by 2030. And given the run rate that we're on, right, and giving the cost of delivery and what it takes to get, access to clean water to an individual, we're on a run rate where we'll actually cross that finish line. That's exciting.
That's amazing.
That's exciting, and we're really thrilled about that. And, the thing about clean water and access to clean water, people, that's something they can see, right? They get that, right? Because it's something they have to deal with on a daily basis. So that's really exciting. What we're doing in the area of mother and child health is very exciting as well. And when we talk about mother and child health, I mean, we focus on the first 1,000 days from basically conception to the 2 years of age of that child, and focused on nutritional practices and better foods and educating mom and the importance of mom seeing her physician or a nurse practitioner, to use our terms. But we have this army of volunteer health workers of a little over 200,000 at this point.
Wow.
That, you and I might live as a family, we might live 7, 8, 10 miles from the nearest rural clinic.
Yep.
Is liberal use of the term.
Right.
But these volunteer healthcare workers are going, house to house, hut to hut, village to village, and educating these families on the importance. And it's just really neat work to see taking place. And so we've obviously the loss of mothers in birth, the loss of children, all of those numbers are being pushed down. So that's exciting work.
Great. Yeah.
It's exciting work. So those are a couple of things we're really focused on.
Water, mother and child health.
Mother and child health,
Nice.
access to clean water. Big things. And, that's just a part of the whole overall approach that we have to alleviating extreme poverty. So
that's awesome. Well, Dan, as we wrap up, let's go back to Ethiopia for a second. So, and then we'll ask you to kind of wind us down with a final question. I got to meet one of my sponsored children in Ethiopia. You know what I gave him? Shalem. You know what I gave him?
a Georgia jersey.
Georgia stuff. All kinds of Georgia stuff.
Same thing.
It was crazy. Go Dogs, man. I got Georgia all over Ethiopia. Like it's spreading like wildfire.
Oh yeah. Well, if they're anywhere close to Kui, she's got all the Arbin gear on. So
That's funny.
Maybe they'll get together on game day.
yeah.
So I always give Dan a hard time about this because we thought we were going to Ethiopia to see water projects, which we did.
Uh-huh.
But in one of our early trips, we fly to Mekelle.
Okay, McKinley. Yeah.
Did we? I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, I hope I get it right. Mesrach is probably like, oh, they don't even remember the itinerary. But we participate in an interfaith forum.
Mm-hmm.
And it is Muslim leaders and Christian leaders, sponsored by World Vision,
You bet.
getting together for the purposes of child protection.
Right.
And Dan, who's already the most popular guy in the room because of his tattoos, gets to do the bread ceremony with the Muslim faith leader, priest
imam.
or cleric, and the Christian faith leader, and they're all grasping hands around the knife to cut the bread. I'm like, that's fine. Dan gets to do it. That's cool.
That's incredible.
Anyway,
That was a good time.
it was, our listeners are probably tired of hearing this, Dan, but it was the catalyst for this podcast. This idea that people who are different
Yes.
can get together, serve one another, and good outcomes can happen in the name of Christ. And I was like, if Muslims and Christians can do this in Ethiopia, like there's a lot of people groups that need to learn from that experience about what it means to walk through Samaria. What it meant for, in the parable in Luke 10, for Jesus to make the Samaritan the hero of the story.
Right.
So with that as a backdrop, and our listeners are like, how many times is David going to tell this story? Give a little good Samaritan wisdom / encouragement to our listeners from Terry Johnson.
Wow. Okay. From a Christian perspective, as a Christ follower, I think you and I have had this conversation a little bit before, maybe. I think the church, Big C Church, I think we need to do a better job of encouraging our fellow brethren to, once you're in the boat, that you need to get busy about being about, reaching others and being, as I don't want to say cliche, but simplistic, being about being the hands and feet of Christ.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're called to do. It's not necessarily about one more Bible study, one more sermon.
Yeah.
Right?
Another binder.
Another
People would say another binder on the shelf. Yeah.
Credenza
After
wear,
a conference. Yeah.
Credenza wear. Yeah, it's not about that. Not that those things aren't. Discipleship's very important.
That's right.
Understanding the Word of God, very important.
Yes.
But there comes a point where it's, okay, we're done praying, we're done reading, pass me a brick, let's get busy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's about getting to work and meeting the needs of the least of these. It really is. Realizing, as Rick would say, it's not about you, right? It's really not about me.
Yeah.
It's not about you.
Yeah.
It's about those folks that we come in contact with in our daily lives,
Yeah.
right? Or if we have the good fortune to travel and see other parts of the world and see real need, in the margins. And how do I fit into that? How can I be a part of that? I think those are the questions, one, we need to ask ourselves. And it's always good to get back to the field because it's that heartbreaking, the things that break the heart of God, you need to see those on a more regular basis.
Yeah.
So it keeps you engaged.
Yeah.
Right. And I think as a church, especially in the West, we need to do a better job of calling our people to task in that space. Right.
I agree.
You're in the boat.
I agree.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Right.
Make something happen.
Yeah.
And it's, we talk about this a lot, Dan and I do, and we've had the privilege of being partners to World Vision. And so our eyes are open. We get reports every couple weeks,
Right.
from Mike and the team, like we're in the game. And I do, without sounding preachy or judgmental,
Right.
like both sides seem empty without the other. And let me tell you what I mean here. This faith versus works
Right.
debate has created tens of thousands of denominations in Christianity
Yeah.
since, back to the days of James. And it seems like such a silly argument to me, right? Like, if you have the benefit of salvation, would you not want to go serve
Right.
those who are on the other side of the road and everybody's forgotten about them and they're
Right.
walking by? At the same time, I also believe, like, doing the work without the gospel
Right.
is a bit hollow.
Right.
And so to me, like, these things were meant to go together, right? Like, that's how the world was designed.
Right.
And that's what I would want our listeners to grasp is, look, we're not saying, hey, if you don't give away everything like the rich
Right.
young ruler,
Right.
or if you don't, if you haven't traveled to places that you've traveled, you're somehow less worthy. That's
Right.
not the point.
Not at all.
But the point is, man, if you open your eyes and care to learn a little bit, you're going to see opportunities to serve everywhere.
Right.
And it just seems to be part of the deal. And frankly, Terry, I just want to compliment you for living this out, for us, right? And because we need examples like you, we need you carrying the torch so that lots of people who are maybe in the business world can be prompted by opportunities
Right.
to meet the needs of people who desperately need it when God comes calling.
Right. Amen. You don't need to change your career.
That's true. Yeah, you don't have to do the radical
Yeah.
thing that you and I did,
And
right?
you don't have to get on a plane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can go across the street.
That's good.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So how can people learn more? World Vision.
awesome.
Get up and get involved.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So obviously, from a contact perspective, online is probably the best place. Go to worldvision.org.
Okay.
And if you want to know about the type of work a lot of the work that we've talked about today, go to worldvision.org/philanthropy. And that'll give you a little bit better view, a little bit more depth to the conversation that we've had here today. And that's where you'll find everything you need to know to become a part of everything we're doing. So
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. I think
Brother,
it's speak for me and
how
David
about
both,
that?
man. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having
and
me.
World Vision too for giving us the experiences that we've been
That's
able to
right.
see.
Amen.
Yeah.
Hope
to be,
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
hope to
fellas.
be
Thanks
back
for
in
everything
the
you do.
field with you all sometime
bet.
in the near
Yeah, I'd love
future.
it.
Thanks for your partnership.
Yeah.
It means a lot.
Well, to our listeners, it has been a pleasure talking with Terry Johnson, a Major Gifts fundraiser for World Vision. He's been doing it for 6 years, and you can just tell his heart and his energy and passion for what's going on out there in the field through World Vision. Dan, it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Pleasure.
Yeah. To all of our listeners, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time on the Walking Through Samaria podcast.
Thanks, guys. For more content like this, visit us at givingcompany.com. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Walking Through Samaria.